Elvis Presley was about to change Anita Wood's life forever, and she didn't even know it yet. It was a warm evening, just before Elvis was set to join the army. The house was quiet, the only sounds coming from the soft ticking of the clock and the gentle hum of the city outside. Anita sat on the couch, nervous and excited, waiting for Elvis to finish tuning the piano. Elvis walked over to the instrument, his eyes gleaming with a mix of playfulness and something deeper. He sat down and played a single note, a clear, ringing sound that filled the room. "That's your key," he said, looking at Anita with a mischievous grin. "My key," she repeated, her voice tinged with surprise. She had never thought about it that way. It was as if Elvis had just handed her a secret code, a key to a world she didn't know existed. Without another word, Elvis started playing the piano, a soft melodic tune that seemed to wrap around her like a warm embrace. Anita felt a shiver run down her spine as she began to sing "I Can't Help It," her voice blending perfectly with the music. Elvis joined in, repeating the phrase "still in love with you" whenever it came up. The room was filled with the sound of their voices, and for a moment, everything else faded away. As they sang, Elvis and Anita fell into a comfortable rhythm, discussing what kind of songs she should sing if she ever made records. Elvis told her not to sound like Julie London, suggesting instead that she try to sound more like Connie Francis. They decided to perform Connie's hit, "Who's Sorry Now," and the ink spots when the swallows come back to Capistrano. Anita's voice soared, and Elvis's piano playing was a perfect accompaniment. It was clear that they had a special connection, a harmony that went beyond just music. But the moment was fleeting. Elvis's time in the civilian world was coming to an end. Soon he would be in the army, and Anita would be left behind, wondering what might have been. The night they spent together, singing and laughing, would become a cherished memory, a reminder of a time when anything seemed possible. Elvis's next stop was Texas, where he visited Eddie Faddle's house. They were waiting for orders to go to Germany, and the atmosphere was tense. Elvis needed a distraction, something to take his mind off the uncertainty of the future. He sat down at the piano and started playing "I Understand Just How You Feel," a doo-wop hit that had first been recorded by the Four Toons in 1953. The song was based around Auld Lang Syne, and Elvis's high tenor voice built up to a powerful ending. It was a beautiful performance, but the background noise, including a crying baby, made it hard to fully appreciate. Despite the distractions, Elvis couldn't help but think about the song's potential. He wondered if he could record it himself, maybe make it his own. But the noise around him was too much, and he had to focus on the present. The song would later become a hit for the G-Clefs and Freddie and the Dreamers, but Elvis's version remained a private moment, a glimpse of what could have been. In 1959, Elvis found himself in Germany, far from home but still finding ways to stay connected to his roots. He had a Grundig recorder and used it to capture his music, even though he wasn't doing any professional sessions in Europe. One of the songs he recorded was "I Asked the Lord," a gospel song associated with Mahalia Jackson. He threw in a few notes from Jingle Bells for fun, creating a unique blend of sacred and secular. Another recording was "I'm Beginning to Forget You," a Jim Reeves B-side. But it was his stunning vocal on "Mona Lisa," originally performed by Nat King Cole, that stood out. If only he had recorded it in a studio, it could have been a classic. Elvis also recorded a touching version of "Danny Boy," a song about a soldier who had lost his life. It was a fitting choice given his circumstances. He then played piano on "Soldier Boy," written by David Jones of the Four Fellows while in Korea. The song resonated with him, and he played around with it, adding his own touch. Before he started, he asked someone to shut the window to keep out the screams from the fans. It was a small request, but it showed how much he valued the music. In 1960, Elvis was back in Bel Air, and he recorded a piano boogie of a risque song called "Birthday Cake." It was a playful, Jerry Lee Lewis-style performance, but it was too muffled to fully enjoy. From the same time, he recorded "Make Believe" from Showboat, with harmonies from Red West and Nancy Sharp. Nancy was working on the wardrobe for Flaming Star, and the song had a beautiful, theatrical quality that could have worked well in Elvis's later Vegas performances. Elvis's love for music never waned, and he continued to explore different genres. He had a tape of a song called "I Wonder," which he seemed to be making up on the piano as he went along. His friends joined in, and the impromptu performance was a lot of fun. It was a reminder that, no matter where he was or what he was doing, Elvis always found a way to make music. Elvis's time in the Army had changed him, but it hadn't dimmed his passion for music. In 1966, he was living in Rocca Place, Hollywood, and working on a film. Red West, one of his closest friends, had written a few songs and wanted to make demo recordings with his friends Charlie Hodge and Glenn Campbell. Elvis got involved, adding harmonies and vocals to songs like I've Been Blue, It's No Fun Being Lonely, and Mary Lou Brown. It was a creative and collaborative environment, and it was clear that Elvis was enjoying the process, but not everything was smooth sailing. Elvis was frustrated with the quality of the songs he was being given. He instructed Red to send a pile of demos back to Colonel Parker with a note that said, "Shit." Parker was not amused, but Elvis was determined to have more control over his music. Elvis's recordings from this period revealed a lot about his musical tastes and influences. He had a deep appreciation for French pop and was particularly fond of a song called Venice Blue, written by Charles Aznavour. It would have been perfect for him, but he never pursued it, and it ended up being a hit for Bobby Darin. Elvis and his friends also had fun with country standards like Bob Wills, San Antonio Rose, and the Sons of the Pioneers, Tumblin' Tumbleweeds. They laughed and joked as they played, but the laughter sometimes drowned out the jokes, making it hard to tell which ones were actually funny. Still, it was clear that they were having a great time, and the camaraderie was evident in every note. Elvis's home recordings from the 1960s and 1970s are a treasure trove of musical moments, some serious and some just for fun. In 1966, he recorded a Dean Martin song, Write to Me from Naples, and a 1951 hit by Guy Mitchell, My Heart Cries for You. He also played around with Dark Moon, a 1957 hit for Bonnie Guitar and Gale Storm. The song was a favorite, and Elvis spent 6 minutes working on it, making it worth a listen on YouTube. In 1971, Elvis recorded I'm Still Here, written and recorded by Ivory Joe Hunter in 1964, and the Irish ballad I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen. In 1973, he sang another Ivory Joe Hunter ballad, I Will Be True, this time from 1952. These recordings show a different side of Elvis, one that was deeply connected to his musical roots and always exploring new sound. Elvis's home in Graceland was a place of creativity and experimentation. He had professional recording equipment in his jungle room, and it's likely that there are many more recordings stored away, waiting to be discovered. Some of these recordings are already available, and they offer a fascinating glimpse into Elvis's musical journey. From the intimate moments with Anita Wood to the playful sessions with his friends, these recordings capture the essence of Elvis Presley, a man who never stopped making music, even in the most unexpected places. Elvis Presley was at a crossroads in his career. Despite his fame and success, he was growing bored with the repetitive and often lackluster movies he was making. In 1964, he met a hairdresser named Larry Geller, who also became his spiritual advisor. This was a time when Elvis was questioning his path and seeking deeper meaning in his life. Geller took Elvis into the desert, where Elvis had a profound spiritual experience, seeing a cloud that transformed into the face of Jesus. He realized he needed to find a purpose beyond his fame. However, his manager, Colonel Parker, wasn't supportive of this new direction and wanted Elvis to focus on his career. Despite the spiritual journey, Elvis continued to make movies, including Girl Happy in 1965. In this film, he played Rusty Wells, a nightclub singer who travels to Fort Lauderdale to chaperone Shelley Fabares, the daughter of a mobster. The plot was thin, and the songs, including the title track and Do the Clam, were forgettable. Elvis even had to wear a blonde wig, and at one point dress in drag. It was clear that Elvis was not enjoying these roles, and his performance reflected his lack of enthusiasm. The film company that produced Girl Happy, Allied Artists, was struggling financially and saw Elvis as a quick fix. They cut corners by using existing songs instead of commissioning new ones. The result was Tickle Me, a film that was even cheaper and more forgettable than Girl Happy. The title alone was a joke, and the movie featured Elvis on a female dude ranch, which was supposed to be a draw for audiences. film had some Western sequences, but the overall quality was poor, and the songs were weak. Despite the monotony of his film career, Elvis had a surprise hit with Crying in the Chapel. This song, recorded in 1960 but not released until 1965, climbed to No. 3 on the Billboard charts and became a No. 1 hit in the UK. It was a moment of renewed success, but it didn't change the direction of his career. After filming Frankie and Johnny, Elvis and his friends celebrated by buying motorcycles and riding around. In August 1965, Elvis traveled to Hawaii to film Paradise Hawaiian Style. In the movie, he played a helicopter pilot, but he didn't do any of the actual flying. While in Hawaii, he visited the USS Arizona Memorial and laid a wreath, a moment of quiet reflection amidst the commercial chaos of his life. After the film, Elvis signed long-term deals with Hal Wallis RCA and Colonel Parker, who would now officially receive 50% of Elvis' earnings. When asked about these deals, Parker casually remarked, "I've got to make a living." Elvis' 10th anniversary with RCA was marked by the release of Elvis for Everyone, a compilation album that included songs from his earlier recordings. The album was a commercial success, but was criticized for its lack of new material and hit songs. In August 1965, the Beatles came to America for a stadium tour, and there was a lot of buzz about a potential meeting with Elvis. After some negotiations, the Beatles, along with Brian Epstein, Mal Evans, Neil Aspinall, Tony Barrow, and their driver Alf Bicknell, visited Elvis at his home in Bel Air. They were impressed by Elvis' luxurious home and his remote control TV, which was a novelty at the time. The meeting was relaxed and informal. Elvis and the Beatles discussed their experiences with fame and the challenges of travel. Elvis played a record he loved, Mohair Sam by Charlie Rich, and they jammed together, starting with Cilla Black's You're My World. George Harrison shared a joint with Larry Geller, and Ringo and Mal played pool with Elvis friends. Colonel Parker and Brian Epstein played roulette, and Priscilla, Elvis' girlfriend, walked around in a long dress and tiara, looking like a Barbie doll. Despite the excitement of the meeting, it didn't lead to any significant changes in Elvis' career. He continued to make movies that followed the same formula, and his creative frustration grew. The Beatles, on the other hand, were at the height of their fame and innovation, and their visit to Elvis' home was a moment that both fans and historians would remember for years to come. Elvis and the Beatles never quite got to meet. When the Beatles finally arrived in the United States, they were given a pack of Elvis records as a welcoming gift. A fan snapped a photo of Elvis saying goodbye, and as they left, John Lennon shouted, "Long live the King." But as the limousine pulled away, John whispered to George Harrison, "That wasn't Elvis, it was just a feller." George replied with a laugh, "Aren't we all?" Elvis' cousin, Donna Presley Early, had a different take. She said, "Elvis wasn't jealous of the Beatles. He knew the world was big and there was room for everyone. He loved listening to their records and even played them for me. He adored a variety of music, from Brooke Benton to the Platters and the Ink Spots, and especially gospel." The next day, Elvis was invited to meet the Beatles, but only a few of his close friends, the Memphis Mafia, went. The Beatles were also invited to Elvis' concert at the Hollywood Bowl, but they knew their loyalty was to Elvis, and it would have been too much. Alf Bicknell, who met Elvis, was impressed by his friends. "Elvis boys were like stars themselves, much more confident than us. They took us to some nightclubs and even got the singers to perform just for us. We couldn't have done that." John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas visited Elvis at his home in Bel Air. "Elvis showed me his swimming pool and his AstroTurf lawn. He was proud of it, saying, 'You never have to cut it.'" Elvis was a bit uneasy about the Beatles, maybe because of their education. Most rock and rollers, including Elvis, had basic educations. The Beatles, though, had gone to grammar school, which made them seem more intellectual. Hunter Davies, a Beatles biographer, noted, "John and Paul were big readers. They read Lewis Carroll, and it shows in their music. They were always learning and changing. Despite this, Elvis continued to make movies." Harum Scarum, or Hareem Holiday in the UK, was a disaster. It was a cheap, poor-quality film where Elvis played a movie star kidnapped in the Middle East. He looked terrible in his green pantaloons, and the only good song was "So Close, Yet So Far." The film was so bad that one character flubbed his lines while peeling a banana, and Elvis laughed, and it made it into the final cut. Elvis wasn't interested in the film at first, and spent time with Larry Geller instead. Colonel Parker, his manager, pretended to have a heart condition to buy time, then forced Elvis to go. The only bright spot was Mary Ann Mobley, who had been Miss America. Elvis' next film, Frankie and Johnny, was set on a riverboat and was just as bad. The only memorable songs were old classics like Frankie and Johnny and When the Saints Go Marching In. The duet with Eileen Wilson, Petunia, the gardener's daughter, was one of the worst parts of the film. The best new song, What Every Woman Lives For, was incredibly sexist. Elvis' hair looked unnatural in Paradise, Hawaiian Style, and he was less than enthusiastic about showing off his body. The film was so bad that it made Blue Hawaii look like a masterpiece. His co-star, Susanna Lee, didn't respond to his advances, and when Richard Harris visited her on set, Elvis went AWOL for a few days. The film had some beautiful aerial shots, but the acting was terrible. Julie Parrish, another actress in the film, was a big Elvis fan. She auditioned for a different role, but ended up in Paradise, Hawaiian Style. She and Elvis sang A Dog's Life together, a song about struggling with 4 dogs in a helicopter. Elvis found it so ridiculous that he laughed uncontrollably while recording it. Elvis' next film, Spin Out, or California Holiday in the UK, was about car racing. Warren Oates, who worked with Elvis, said he could drive a racing car while stoned. The film was a bit more fun, with Elvis racing an experimental car and dealing with the singers Shelley Fabares and Deborah Wally. Surprisingly, Elvis didn't end up with a girl, but the film was still a hit. Elvis' new producer, Felton Jarvis, wanted to give Elvis better songs. They worked together to find the right material, and Elvis' voice shone in a gospel album. The band included some of the best musicians around, like Scotty Moore, Floyd Kramer, and the Jordanaires. The album was a departure from his earlier gospel work, with a fuller, more diverse sound. Elvis' cousin Donna reflected on his music. I love everything he did. How Great Thou Art is my favorite, but I also love funny how time slips away in loving you. Even when they made mistakes in the studio, Elvis always took the blame himself. Elvis' career was a roller coaster, but his fans always stuck with him. Despite the bad movies and the changing times, Elvis remained a king. Elvis Presley's career took an interesting turn in the 1960s. His music was inspired by both black and white gospel, and one of his most iconic songs, Stand By Me, was actually a blues song originally written by Charles Tindley in 1905. Another song, Farther Along, had roots in the travels of a Missouri preacher who would ride his horse to reach his congregation. Elvis's version of this song was slower than most, perhaps to really bring out the meaning of the lyrics. This slower, more emotional approach was part of his album, How Great Thou Art, which was a hit in 1967 and even earned him a Grammy nomination. This was a big deal because, despite his massive popularity, Elvis had never won a Grammy before. Some people thought it was because he had shaken up the music industry with rock and roll in the 1950s, but the truth was that the Grammys didn't start until 1958, so his early hits weren't eligible. In 1959, Elvis was nominated for Record of the Year with A Fool Such As I, but lost to Bobby Darin's Mac the Knife. In 1960, he was nominated for Best Vocal Performance for Are You Lonesome Tonight, but Ray Charles's Georgia on My Mind took the prize. These were tough losses, but the songs that won were really good, so Elvis couldn't complain much. In 1967, he finally won his first Grammy for Best Sacred Performance with How Great Thou Art, beating out some big names like the Browns and Red Foley. Elvis's producer, Felton Jarvis, was finding some great songs for him. One of these was Down in the Alley, a blues song with a strong beat that Elvis must have loved, especially the lyrics about bowling with a girl until 3:30 a.m. Another hit was Love Letters, which became a U.S. Top 20 single and even made the top 10 in the UK. Elvis's version of Indescribably Blue was also a hit, showing that he was still capable of making great music. The 1960s folk revival didn't really appeal to Elvis, but he did record a Bob Dylan song, Tomorrow is a Long Time, which he heard on an Odetta album. He did a great job with it, proving that he could handle different styles of music. In 1966, Elvis starred in the movie Easy Come, Easy Go, where he played a Navy lieutenant named Ted Jackson. The movie was a bit cynical, with Elvis singing about all the girls he meets in every port. One of the songs, The Love Machine, was particularly bad, and the best song, I'll Take Love, had a nod to Les Bambas. The cast included the actress Elsa Lanchester, who played a lively yogi, giving Elvis a chance to sing Yoga is as Yoga does. Elvis's health was a bit of a concern at this time. He caught a cold and was visited by Dr. George Nishapoulos, who would later become his personal doctor. Despite not feeling his best, Elvis recorded a Christmas song, If Every Day Was Like Christmas, which became a UK Top 10 single. He and Priscilla announced their engagement on Christmas Day, 1966, but the Colonel was probably more interested in how a marriage might keep Elvis away from other women and his love for guns. Elvis's spending habits were getting out of control. He bought 19 horses, one for each of his staff, and even a ranch called the Circle G in Mississippi. He also bought a Lear jet, even though he wasn't touring much at the time. It seemed like he was trying to compensate for the lack of record sales and falling audiences for his films. In 1967, Elvis starred in Double Trouble, a movie that was supposed to have an English heiress, but the role was given to an unknown actress, Annette Day. The film was a bit of a mess, with Elvis singing Old MacDonald to some chickens and long-legged girl with the short dress on to his chick. The songs weren't great, and the film was shot entirely on a soundstage in Los Angeles, even though the story was supposed to be set in England. Elvis's next film, Clambake, was another disappointment. He played a rich man's son, who discovers powerboat racing and water skiing. The best part of the movie was probably his performance of You Don't Know Me, a country standard that he sang beautifully. The film's songs, like Clambake and Confidence, were forgettable, but Elvis's white suit from the film was cut into pieces and given to fans who bought a special box set. Despite the poor quality of his films, Elvis and Priscilla's relationship was growing. On May 1, 1967, they flew to Las Vegas and got married in a small ceremony at the Aladdin Hotel. The media was caught off guard, but the world's most eligible bachelor was now married. Priscilla, with her dark hair and eyes, fit in well with Elvis's style, and she even dressed up as a vampire for Halloween at Graceland. Elvis's marriage to Priscilla was a significant moment in his life, but his career was still struggling. The 1960s were a time of great change in music, with artists like Bob Dylan, the Beach Boys, and the Beatles pushing boundaries. Elvis's films and music were lagging behind, but his personal life was about to take a new turn. Elvis Presley's wedding created a lot of bad feelings with his close group of friends, the Memphis Mafia, especially Red West. They were upset because they didn't know about it. Priscilla might have wanted a more private event, and Colonel Parker told them there wasn't time to find a bigger room, but that didn't make sense to anyone. In June 1967, the Beatles released their album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The cover had pictures of many famous people, but Elvis wasn't on it. The artist Peter Blake said they left Elvis out on purpose because the Beatles didn't like his recent movies. Paul McCartney later said they often asked their producer, George Martin, for the Elvis echo when recording, and they got it right on the song A Day in the Life. Meanwhile, Elvis was busy with his next movie, Speedway, where he played a stock car racer. He was losing weight from taking diet and sleeping pills. The movie had a few songs, but not as many as fans might have hoped. The best song was Your Time Hasn't Come Yet, Baby, which was about encouraging a girl to grow up. Another song, Who Are You, had a nice jazz saxophone sound. However, He's Your Uncle, Not Your Dad, was terrible but necessary for the plot. Elvis was recording his vocals to pre-made backing tracks, and he didn't seem to care much about it. Jerry Reed, a talented singer and guitarist, played a big role in Elvis's next recording session. They recorded Guitar Man and Big Boss Man, both of which became hits. Elvis was in a great mood, and even did a funny version of Ode to Billy Joe by Bobby Gentry. Elvis also recorded some older songs like You Don't Know Me and Just Call Me Lonesome. Some of the other songs were a bit silly, like Singing Tree and Mine, but there was a nice gospel song called We Call on Him, and a powerful version of You'll Never Walk Alone where Elvis played the piano. In October, Elvis went to Arizona to make Stay Away Joe. He played a rodeo rider, who helps his Native American reservation. The film had some good moments, but it ended with Elvis's house being demolished. The songs in the movie were okay, but nothing special. Elvis and Priscilla were excited about their upcoming baby, but Elvis felt like he was falling behind in the music world. He called Colonel Parker, who suggested Elvis do a Christmas special and a Clint Eastwood-style Western movie. Elvis agreed, hoping to make a comeback. Elvis's film career was interesting. He always played characters similar to himself, from the South with a Southern accent. He never tried to change his appearance or act in a different way. This made some people wonder how good an actor he really was. Elvis was popular in musical films, and he made a lot of money from them. He was in the top 10 box office stars for 7 years, from 1957 to 1966, which was a big deal. Other singers like Pat Boone and Bobby Darin also made movies, but they weren't as successful as Elvis. Pat Boone was more of a family entertainer, and couldn't play more dramatic roles. Bobby Darin was a good actor, but didn't get the same box office success. Johnny Cash and Roy Orbison tried acting too, but their movies didn't do well. Cliff Richard in the UK had some success with his movies, but he couldn't compete with the Beatles. Elvis's movies were fun and made money, but they didn't challenge him as an actor. As the 1960s went on, Elvis's films became less exciting, and he knew he needed to do something different. The Colonel had some ideas, but Elvis was ready for a change. He wanted to get back to what made him famous: music and live performances. Elvis Presley had a love-hate relationship with movies. Some people loved him, but others couldn't stand his exaggerated delivery and sometimes over-the-top performances. He started as a child actor and became a teen idol with roles like Jeep Jones in Idol on Parade, 1959. His unique voice and recognizable delivery made him a standout, even if not everyone appreciated his style. Around the same time, Adam Faith was making a name for himself. He had more charisma as an actor than as a pop singer. Movies like Beat Girl and Never Let Go in 1960 showed his acting potential, and he later starred in successful stage productions and TV series. Unlike Elvis, Adam seemed to find his true calling in acting. Pop stars in movies often faced tough reviews. Critics sometimes dismissed their performances, even when they were good. Elvis, for example, was unfairly criticized for his role in Love Me Tender. Elvis's films started strong, but by the 1960s, they became less significant. Despite his good looks and physical presence, Elvis didn't show much range in his acting. Directors and producers didn't challenge him, and his films often felt rushed and unremarkable. The Beatles, on the other hand, had a natural charm in their early films. A Hard Day's Night, 1964, was a hit, but Help, 1965, didn't quite live up to it. John Lennon did well in How I Won the War, 1966, but Ringo Starr was the only Beatle to continue acting regularly. Other musicians like David Bowie and Barbra Streisand, and also found success in films. Bowie's roles in The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976, and Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983, were memorable, while Streisand and starred in musicals like Funny Girl, 1968, and Hello, Dolly, 1969. Both showed that they could hold their own in both music and film. Elvis's personal life was also complicated. In 1968, his daughter Lisa Marie was born, but his marriage to Priscilla was strained. Elvis's friends noticed that he was losing interest in Priscilla, and Priscilla herself had her own romantic entanglements. Elvis's friend Tom Jones suggested he try a residency in Las Vegas, which seemed like a better fit than making movies. By 1968, Elvis's film career was in decline. Live a Little, Love a Little was one of the last films he made, and it was never released in the UK. The film tried to update Elvis's image with more mature themes, but it didn't resonate with audiences. The songs, including A Little Less Conversation and Wonderful World, were decent, but the film itself was forgettable. Elvis's relationship with Priscilla was further strained by his casual relationships with co-stars. Priscilla had her own issues, and the tension between them grew. Elvis and Priscilla took a trip to Hawaii, where Elvis met Mike Stone, a karate instructor. Elvis was impressed by Stone's skills, and Priscilla was drawn to his physique. Despite the challenges, Elvis was still a major star. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, was initially reluctant to let Elvis appear on TV, fearing it would hurt his movie career. But with Elvis's films losing their appeal, Parker agreed to a TV special. The show, produced by NBC and sponsored by the Singer Sewing Machine Company, was meant to be a comeback. Bob Finkel, a seasoned producer, and Steve Binder, a director known for his work on Hullabaloo and The Tea, Ami show, were brought on board. They planned a show that would highlight Elvis's early career and his musical roots. The idea was to create a series of impressive performances, with Elvis and his old friends playing familiar songs. The show's atmosphere was relaxed, with Elvis joking and reminiscing with Scotty Moore, DJ Fontana, and other musicians. The performances were electric, and the show, later known as the Elvis Comeback Special, was a huge success. It marked a turning point in Elvis's career and set the stage for his return to live performances in Las Vegas. Elvis's journey from a child actor to a teen idol, to a film star, and finally to a TV comeback, shows the ups and downs of a legendary career. Despite the challenges, Elvis's talent and charisma always shone through, making him a true icon of American entertainment. Elvis Presley's shows on June 27, 1968, were a mix of chaos and magic. Colonel Parker, Elvis' manager, hadn't distributed the tickets properly, so a local radio station announced that Elvis was doing 2 shows, and anyone could try to get in. This led to some lucky fans waking up that morning with no idea they would see Elvis later. The shows were packed, and the room was electric with excitement. Elvis looked amazing in black leather, but he was sweating so much that his dresser had to quickly get him ready for the second show. Elvis performed a mix of old favorites like Heartbreak Hotel and Blue Suede Shoes, and he sounded a bit hoarse, which only added to the intensity. He told a funny story about being filmed by the police in Florida, because they thought his moves were too wild. The audience loved it, and the musicians couldn't stop laughing. Elvis also played with his band, and they had a great time, even when things got a bit messy. For example, Scotty Moore, Elvis' guitarist, didn't have a guitar strap, so he had to improvise by singing about needing one to the tune of One Night. One of the highlights was the song, If I Can Dream, which Elvis initially thought was too Broadway. But once he realized it could have a bluesy feel, he loved it. The song became a powerful ending to the show, and everyone knew it was special, except for Colonel Parker, who wanted a Christmas song. A few days later, Elvis did more shows with a full orchestra, performing hits like Hound Dog and Love Me Tender. The production numbers were impressive, with songs like Big Boss Man and Let Yourself Go. One scene in a bordello was cut for being too spicy, but was later restored for video releases. Elvis was on a roll, and by the end of June, his TV special was ready. He was excited about a new film project, a western called Chero. He wanted to make an American version of the Italian westerns he loved, with a gritty look and lots of action. However, the film didn't quite work. Elvis looked bland, and the story was confusing. Despite some publicity, the film didn't get much attention. In October, Elvis started working on another film, The Trouble with Girls and How to Get Into It. This was a comedy set in the 1920s, and Elvis played a man running a traveling sideshow. The film had multiple plots and a lot of music, but it was confusing and didn't showcase Elvis' talents well. The single, Clean Up Your Own Backyard, was a moderate success, but the film itself was a letdown. Despite the mixed results with these films, the TV special was a huge success. It aired on December 3, 1968, and had high ratings, just like Elvis' appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show years earlier. The single, If I Can Dream, became a hit, reaching No. 12 on the charts. The special was praised as a landmark and a stunning affirmation of his talent. Elvis was thrilled with the success and told Steve Binder, the director, that he would never perform a song or make a movie he didn't believe in. This marked a new chapter in Elvis' career, where he was determined to take control and do things his way. Elvis' association with Las Vegas began in 1969, and it was a different Vegas from the one Frank Sinatra had known. The city was cleaning up, and the mob was losing its grip. Elvis shows in Vegas would become legendary, but the journey to get there was a mix of highs and lows. Elvis always knew how to look good and connect with his audience, and he was ready to bring his unique style to the stage. Elvis and Priscilla Presley started the new year with a bang, hosting a lively party at the Thunderbird Lounge in Memphis. The dance floor was packed, as Elvis and Priscilla grooved to a mix of old and new hits. Elvis couldn't get enough of Billy Stewart's upbeat version of Summertime and the soulful sounds of Aretha Franklin's Chain of Fools. The night was a blast, but beneath the fun, Elvis was dealing with a lot of stress. Despite the success of his 1968 TV special, Elvis was feeling down about heading back to Nashville to record with Felton Jarvis on January 13. He hadn't released a great album since the early 60s, and the idea of another lackluster record was weighing on him. The pressure from Freddie Bienstock and Colonel Parker to get a 50% cut of the publishing rights on new songs only added to his frustration. Elvis wanted to make a new album, but the best songs were out of reach. Thankfully, his friends George Klein and Marty Lacker had a solution. They suggested recording at American Sound Studios, a small but legendary studio in Memphis. The studio, run by the talented and tough Chips Moman, had produced hits for artists like Wilson Pickett and Ben E. King. Elvis was hesitant at first, but the idea of working in a studio close to home and with a proven track record of success was too good to pass up. Felton Jarvis was surprisingly supportive of the change, and within days, plans were set in motion. Elvis and his team arrived at American Sound Studios, and the atmosphere was electric. The studio was located in a rough part of town, and Elvis joked about the rats scurrying around, but he was excited to be back in Memphis. The cold didn't dampen his spirit. If anything, it added a gritty edge to his voice. The sessions were intense, with Elvis and the band working late into the night. The musicians, including Reggie Young, Bobby Emmons, and Bobby Wood, were top-notch and perfectly in sync with Elvis. Chips Moman, the studio's owner, worked tirelessly to find the right songs for Elvis to record. Elvis insisted on singing the songs he loved, and Marty Lacker knew this could be seen as rebellion, but Elvis was determined to do things his way. Despite his cold and tonsillitis, Elvis delivered powerhouse performances. Songs like Long Black Limousine resonated deeply with him, and his emotional connection to the lyrics was obvious. By the end of the sessions, they had produced 30 completed masters, including 2 signature tracks, 2 hit singles, and 2 million-selling albums. Elvis was thrilled and told Chips, "We've done some hits here, man." The success of these sessions marked a new chapter in Elvis' career. He was back, and he was better than ever. The innovative designs of Bill Bellew's stage costumes, the powerful new music from American Sound Studios, and Elvis' undeniable charisma all came together to create a legendary performer who continued to captivate audiences until the end. Elvis' journey was far from over, and his impact on music and culture would continue to resonate for generations to come.